Okay, podcast 4. Happy Sunday, everybody. This is January 29th, Sunday, 2023. And today's discussion is the beast, government. The beast, the evil government being the beast, whom is run by the banking cartel. All the big banking families of Europe and America, they're the bad guys who run our government, and the CIA and all the other governments and all the dirty work. Okay? So I'm going to lay this out for you. You know, if you ever hear anybody talk about the conspiracy theory, okay, they forever label themselves as morons and imbeciles who know nothing and only deny the truth. Okay? I'm going to lay out for you about 170 years of fact, okay? Not theory. The conspiracy of fact against the American people and Russia and China, okay? So pay attention. We'll have a good time here. So if we're going to talk about evil on the planet, we better start at the top of the pyramid. And that starts with an alien race known as the Greys. Now, there are good Greys that are benevolent and help us. There are evil Greys that are very evil. They run a portion of the universe where they're allowed to have free will and rain down evil. Earth is in that apportionment of the universe where the evil Greys are allowed to exercise evil. As I understand it, in all other universes outside of the area where we live, all populations live under divine law. And they live under divine law because why would you want to live out of divine law? Why would you want to do anything contrary to light, love, and God? It doesn't really make sense, does it? So, the evil Greys have been manufacturing machinery for many, many eons to basically give shock therapy to our etheric bodies when we die, remove our memories of our past life so we know nothing about what we've just gained, the wisdom that we've just gained from our past life. So we keep coming here being rebirthed into the same cycle of ignorance and darkness that we were born into the previous life. So, that's how it seems that evil has so entrenched itself into this little planet of ours. And, you know, anybody who talks about aliens is pretty much disappeared, murdered, ex-nayed by the government pretty promptly. But, you know, for all the speculators who don't pay attention, you know, there's two books that really say it all in large part. One is the book by Colonel Corsair called The Day After Roswell. And The Day After Roswell is written by the man, Colonel Corsair, who was in charge of running all of the whole program regarding the crashed spaceship in Roswell. He kept it quiet and hidden from the CIA, the FBI, the Pentagon, everybody. What he did do was he funneled all the high-tech computer stuff through AT&T and Bell Laboratories. He funneled all the other aspects of that ship that were found and reverse engineered everything through standard Army research and development, R&D, and he kept it quiet. So in 1998, 50 years after the crash of Roswell, it was declassified, so he let out the book telling his whole story about how he was able to hide this and yet develop all the technology that was landed in Roswell, New Mexico, when the ship crashed. So then there's the other side of it. There was the commander of that ship was still alive, and the other two lesser officers' bodies had died. So they took the commander and they took him to a base and they debriefed him. And the commander said, hey, you know, I'm like any other military officer. I'm allowed to tell you so much. I'm not going to tell you anything beyond what I'm allowed to tell you. And I hope you respect that. And I'll answer as many questions for you as I can. So he did. So one of the things he brought to light was the fact that his little alien body is not really a biological body at all, because you can't travel through space like aliens do for lengthy times and hostile conditions and cold temperatures, etc., high radiations in a bio body, because it's just too weak. It's not set up for that. So they have synthetic bodies, kind of doll bodies, drones, whatever you want to call them, little robots. They're connected to the central computer of their civilization. The higher ups, like commanders and higher ups, officers, they have links to the master computer that carries all of the knowledge of all of their wisdom and all of their science and all of their research for thousands of years. So they're literally know a whole lot. And so this alien would only communicate with one person, and that was a telepathic communication. And she was a nurse, an army nurse. And so the only way the government could communicate with this alien was for her playing interpreter. So that's what happened. Well, as it worked out, she did her job, and then the alien told the government, the army, he says, I'm going to be leaving here within 24 hours. There's nothing you can do about it. I can't answer any more of your questions, and that's going to be the end of everything. So the next day, the nurse brought in a transcript of everything that he had said. The army wanted him to sign it so that they could hold any future Greys, and this is a benevolent Grey, by the way, one of the good guys, any future Greys legally responsible for the information that he had given them, so they could hold the Greys to accountability. So he said, yeah, no, I can't sign that. But the nurse, the army nurse who was in charge of that, took the transcript, put it in her jacket, forgot about it, and ended up taking it home. So naturally, the government wanted to hide her and her husband far away, so they moved them up to Montana. They lived there for a long time, quietly, peacefully, secluded. Then the old man, I guess, was from Ireland, so he decided that they wanted to move back to Ireland, which they did, and for many years they retired peacefully in Ireland. So one day, this guy, a reporter named Spencer, found out about this whole story and ended up calling the army nurse and said, hey, what's going on here? What can you tell me? She says, let me send you a little something. So she sent to him the entire transcript that the aliens had given the U.S. Army in the debriefing of him. So Spencer wrote a book, unbelievable book, a shitload of information, and it's called Alien Interview by Spencer. Alien Interview by Spencer. So you get the juice that Alien gave to the army and the government from Alien Interview. You get the officer in charge of hiding and covering up everything about the Roswell crash. And there, with two sides of the story, you get a very big picture of how it all rolls. Okay? So, there you have it. Two books that are really must-reading if you want a clue, know what's going on. Okay. So, the aliens seem to have undue influence over the banking cartel families, Carnegie, Mellons, Morgans, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, all these guys. They're the evil crew, man. They're the satanic monsters, okay? So after the war, the Second World War, Morgan decided to fund Stalin. And in the West, they gave the propaganda that, they're going into egalitarian, agricultural, new green era, and everything's beautiful. And it wasn't, okay? Stalin murdered, 80 million, 200 million, I don't know what the numbers, millions and millions and millions of people in Ukraine and Russia, starving them out so that they could not maintain a revolution against him. So Morgan and the bankers funded the Bolshevik Revolution, funded Stalin, killed millions of people, and Patton wanted to go into Russia right after he kicked ass in Germany to take out the Russians, so we didn't have to deal with the bastards like we do now. Okay, now because of the banking cartel, we've got a whole another communist country trying to bulldoze the world, and now we're going to have to go over there and sit their ass down and park them again. Okay, because the world bankers didn't want Patton to take them out because they wanted to create an enslaved country that they can make lots of money on and be an example of just how low can they get the humans to stoop? And now they know that they can get people to sell out their mother for a quarter of a cigarette. Same thing happened with Mao. Same thing happened with Mao. American bankers funded the Mao Communist Revolution, killed millions, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people, again through starvation. And that was the mechanism for allowing communism to rise in China. And now again, we have a world adversary that runs a slave state that are trying to perpetrate that on us. Okay, and again, it's the bankers pushing all of this, which is why they've stolen our economy over the last 50 years, moved it to China and other places. So we no longer make much of anything except bombs and guns and missiles, and everything else we rely on from that contaminated country, and it's just such debauchery. So all these Nazi motherfuckers, Gates Foundation, BlackRock, George Soros, Annenberg Foundation, who owns Fact Checkers, Bloomberg, Rupert Murdoch, the Cox family, Jeff Bezos, John Henry, the Disney Company, the banks, Morgan, Rockefeller, Rothschild, DuPont's, AT&T now. The government is the enemy. The government is, did I say that wrong? The government is the enemy, okay? Always has been. Hopefully won't always be. But right now, the government is the enemy, okay? And it has been since the Civil War. The Civil War was not about slavery. It was about a 45% tax that the North put on imports, okay, and a 50% tax on iron products, okay? So the southern states were not too pleased about that. Naturally, they balked at having to be taxed unnecessarily by the northern states. And this is what started the Civil War. They demanded their independence. And the North could not have that. They wanted a subjected population, just like the King of England had, just like the King of Spain had, just like the King of France had. So that's what they got. So they got us fighting over illicit taxation, which is theft. And then after a few battles were lost, after a couple years, Lincoln said, this isn't working out too good. We're going to have to change this. And Lincoln was a racist bastard. You can listen to his speeches and watch his writing before the Civil War. And he said he was never interested in abolishing slavery. Okay, he respected it as whatever he respected it as, an act of commerce, I suppose. And so then all of a sudden he realized, well, we've got to win this war, and we've got to win the hearts and minds of people, and we've got to have the moral upper ground, so we better change this whole situation around and call it a war against slavery. So that's what they did. So, America is a defeated population. It's been a defeated population since the Civil War. It's been an exceedingly defeated population since the Depression in the 30s. And that was the whole purpose of both, was to make us a subjected, defeated population, okay? And here we have it, people sitting on the couch watching the Nazis take over their whole world and not doing shit about it. So I beg you all to wake up, pay attention. I'm going to illustrate the conspiracy, not a theory. So, when slavery ended via the the new amendment to our civil rights and our Declaration of Independence, the whole deal was that slaves were free unless they were convicted of crimes. So many of the slave owners said, okay, well, you guys are sitting here and we're going to bust you for truancy, and guess what? You're slaves again. And to this day, Louisiana plays the same game. Louisiana prisons enslave people legally. If you're a criminal, you can be forced labor. And guess who picks the cotton? Okay, they don't pick cotton no more because they have machines to do that. But they're slaved. They're enslaved, and it's okay in Louisiana with the state government that that's how it is. So slavery didn't really end until the 60s and 70s, and additional civil laws were passed, but a lot of black people were still slaves and still down on the farm and still being bullied by their masters. So let that be known, all with government-sanctioned approval, even though slavery had ended and was illegal. It wasn't. 1882, polygamy and polyandry was made illegal. And why is this? Well, because, adults can fashion themselves into any type of living arrangement and or family that they want to. So many adults said, well, I'd like to have 3 wives and maybe a couple husbands and this or that. So they built extended families. They became tribes. They became very independent of the government. If they had their own ranches and their land, they didn't need the government for shit. And that was a threat to government, naturally. So they made polygamy and polyandry illegal so that people got back to 2x2 little relationships, because people paired up in 2x2s are very easy to control. Not so much when you have 15 people in a family and they have 30 kids. Okay, so that's the reason, not because it's religiously against divine law or against religion or this or that. Simply a matter of government control. Then came along the 30s, and they made us all switch into paper money, and then they broke the value of the paper money, so that, again, the holdout Americans who lived independently, had their ranches, had their families, had their wives, had their children, had their livestock, had their businesses, basically lost everything, lost their families, lost their wives, lost their children, and had to stand in line for crackers for 10 years. That was to subject the population, the defeated population, to being totally defeated. Because when you're starving to death and you don't have a family to defend, etc., there's not much to live for. And you become, again, very hungry, very weak, and not very motivated to fight against anything. Then, as if that wasn't enough, in 1934, the Carnegie Foundation and the Rockefellers and the Federal Reserve stole our money. That was in 1913. So we no longer had a treasury. Okay. And, by the way, polyamory and polygamy is still legal in Brazil, Africa, India, and Russia, just so you know. Then America in 1934, via the Carnegie Foundation and the Rockefellers, destroyed their educational system. I have an encyclopedia that's about this thick, okay, English encyclopedia. And now encyclopedias are this thick. So how dumbed down do you think we are when encyclopedias of English language were this big and now they're this big? How dumbed down do you think we are? Well, significantly. So the whole theory of monopolizing education through the Federal Education Department was to make it so the slowest, dumbest kids could pass it through school. But the real reason, that was the selling theory, the real reason was to make sure that everybody had no fucking education whatsoever, okay? Which is why you look at newspapers from 100 and articles from 120, 30 years ago, people were so literate, people wrote like doctors and scientists, okay? And now you read a newspaper and it's written at about an 8th grade level, okay? Same with magazines. So they're very effective in dumbing us down, because an educated population is not easy to control. An ignorant population is very ignorant to control, and that's what has occurred to Americans. So, as if that wasn't enough, they had to regulate religion. And you might know the amendment states that Congress shall pass in our Bill of Rights, Congress shall pass no law regulating religion. So what did they do? They had to cheat and they had to break the Constitution. So they formed the Administrative Agency of the Internal Revenue Service. And the Internal Revenue Service said, well, you can be one of 27 or 28 different categories of nonprofit and church or foundations. And they're all going to be regulated, except for one, because they had to leave one, so they didn't fully break the Constitution. And the one is at the end of all the other 501c3, 505, 503, blah, 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 508 or other. And they don't tell you what it is because they don't want you to know anything about it. But a 508 is a pure church. It's a true church. It's what most churches were before IRS regulated them in 1953. And it's the other method. There's only two methods of freedom in all of America, and that is a 508 church and or a corporation sole. And a corporation sole is what the Vatican is in Italy. Corporation sole is what the Church of Latter-day Saints is, the Mormon Church. So the Catholic Church and Mormon Church have always been nation states within a state. And that's what a corporation sole is. It's a formation of a kingship, a queenship, a bishophood, and a nation state within a state. So states are now making it illegal to form corporation souls, but you can still have your freedom through a 508 pure, true church and through a corporation sole in states where it's legal to do that still. So the reason they wanted to control churches was because they didn't want churches or groups of churches to have any political say, which is why if you're a 501c3 standard dumb church, you can't have a political opinion, because if you do, you can have your nonprofit credentials revoked by the IRS. So if you're a free church, you have no regulations at all by these criminal bastards. So 508, if you want to be free, form a 508 church or a corporation sole. If you want to be regulated, controlled, and told what to do, be a generic church. You might notice that true leaders in the world and true leaders in America are generally assassinated. Gandhi, did amazing things, united the Muslims, united the Hindus, united the Christians, and got them all to kick British right out of India. And then there was Martin Luther King, who spoke nothing but the truth and united the races in this country, left us with a great deal of wisdom and an example to follow, and naturally they had to kill him because he was just too smart. The war on blacks never stopped, and the war on gays has never stopped. Michael Jackson was given so much grief because he was a good guy, a genius, a true heart, an entertainer, and whether he died by accident or on purpose, who knows? I'm sure we'll never know. But the fact is, they sure tried to bury him through all of the pedophilia nonsense about poor Michael Jackson. AIDS was invented by World Health Organization and the CDC back in the 70s. I believe it was 76 that they stuffed it into the hepatitis B vaccine trials in New York, gave it to men who were between 20 and 40 years of age, stated non-monogamous. So the same guys who brought us COVID gave us AIDS to attack the gays. And this was, the whistle was blown by a retired colonel back in the early 80s over the whole AIDS routine. Then came the cocaine, and that again was a war on black people. So they brought all the cocaine in, the military brought all the cocaine in. When Noriega was about to, because he wasn't getting paid enough or whatever else was going on, he was going to blow the whistle on the U.S. government and the military bringing cocaine in from Colombia through his zone. He's going to blow the whistle on the government and go public internationally. So what we do? We invaded Panama and took it over in 3 hours and shut his shit up and put him in prison. In the meantime, the whole modality of that was to destroy the American black family. So they brought in all the cocaine, turned it into crack, gave it to every little black man who wanted to make money selling illicit dope on the corner. Ended up putting all of them in jail for mandatory 10 years, destroyed the black family because all the men were in prison. So, has slavery ever really ended in America? Maybe not so much. Then there was the war on money again. Nixon took us off in 1971, the gold standard. And actually, from the 30s till 1973, I believe, gold, this is the only country in the world that made gold, real money, real specimen, illegal to own. Okay, they went door to door and collected everybody's gold. And then in the 70s, after Nixon took us off the gold standard and gave us funny money with no gold backing, that's when they went ahead and started really devaluating the American currency. As I understand it, our $100 bill in 1971 is worth $2 today. Okay, so we've lost that much. Also, again, it's been brought to light that a brilliant economist has figured out that 93 cents of every dollar that we earn goes back to the government through taxation, redundant taxation. So what a scam that is. So we live on 7% of our wealth, and now less than that with Biden inflation. You know, the government says inflation's at 8-10%, whatever the hell. What nonsense. You know, government inflation is up since Biden took office at least 30%, maybe 35%. It's come down a little bit with gas, but other than that, it's been a disaster, man. You know, I go to buy a sheet of steel. It used to be $28. It's $72 now. You go to buy a $5 2x6, and it's $26. So that's inflation. You know, eggs from $3 a dozen to now $7-8 a dozen. What nonsense. The world bankers are following the very same plan that they've utilized through the Civil War, through the Russian War, through the Chinese War, that now they're doing it to us. They're killing all the chickens because of a bird flu, my ass. Eggs, you know, going through the roof. We're gonna, you know, the USDA a year ago fall told the farmers, sent them letters to plow all their crops under. They would pay them premium if they rototilled them under, so there's no way to save the food. War in Ukraine, you know, is skinnying up the supplies of fertilizer and grain. So, again, they plan on starving us out, it looks like, just like they did with Stalin, just like they did with Mao, just like they did with the Depression, and get us to be rather cooperative, whether we want to be cooperative to the New World Order or not. So, we went ahead and the government decided they needed U.S. government decided they needed total police and military control. So they did the whole, what do they call it, the Oklahoma Federal Building. Supposedly Timmy McVeigh, you know, was the bad guy. But, you know, any explosives knowledgeable person looked at the federal building in Oklahoma City and looked at it, and within 2 seconds you could tell that it was not the bomb in the street that took down the building. It was weeks of planted explosive at the base of these giant columns that were blown out. Okay, there's no way a bomb in a street is going to take out 4 by 8 foot reinforced cement columns. It's not going to happen. You got to plant the explosive at the base and blow those down, and that's how it was done. And it was all just to try and get complete and total suspension of the Constitution and unlimited funding for the military and police, and it didn't work. So they got pissed off. So then they pulled off 911, trained a bunch of Saudis. The FBI trained a bunch of Saudis to fly planes, and then went ahead and blew up the Twin Towers in New York. And with that, they did get unlimited police and military powers and funding and suspension of the Constitution, so we can kill and torture people, call anybody an enemy combatant, and do whatever the fuck they want to do. So now we've got the National Institute of Health, CDC, funding the laboratories in Ukraine, China, and everywhere else with bugs and viruses and bacteria that can be made into deadly weapons, take down, whole populations. And so they let that go, and that was their little social experiment to see again How could they degrade America and the world into, total government control? Do what you're told, stay in your house, crush your small business, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you had a mom and pop Joe's market, you had to close that. Or if you had, Ronnie's Pizza, you had to close that. But Walmart stayed open, and McDonald's stayed open, and Home Depot stayed open. Okay, but you couldn't have your little small business open. You see what I'm saying? They wanted to kick your ass, crush you, put you out of business, so you'd be a good little boy on welfare, and a good little girl on food stamps, and a good little girl or old people on Social Security. Just, take that, be a peon, be a slave, and don't question us. So that's the game with that. In addition to these items, there's the chemical warfare that is going on and has been for a long time. Monosodium glutamate in Bad Taste, a book written about monosodium glutamate, where it comes from, what it is. It's a very toxic substance. It comes about as a result of squeezing the sugar out of sugar beets, processing them, and basically the industrials couldn't find anything to do with it. They tried everything, using it as an antifreeze, everything. Nothing worked. So what did they do? All General Foods and all the food companies of America got together and said, let's use it as a flavor enhancer. We'll put it in people's food. So that's what they've done. And they give it about 40 different names, natural flavoring, this and that, aside from monosodium glutamate, which it is, and they hide it in our food and poison us with that. In Bad Taste, in Bad Taste, the MSG Syndrome is the book, if you want to know about that. So Nazi Hitler's Germany, Hitler asked his scientists to come up with an odorless, tasteless, flavorless compound that would reduce people's will to resist. Guess what? Sodium fluoride was it. So naturally, right after the war, the U.S. government decided to put it in every major city of population over 50 or 100,000. I'm not certain on those numbers, but it went into all the big cities' water systems to reduce your will to resist. Just dumb you down a little bit more, because the education system wasn't dumbing you down maybe quite enough. So that's how that worked. Then we get into then we get into aluminum with your cookware, and now aluminum in your deodorant, zirconium aluminum in your deodorant. And, in nature, fluoride and aluminum are found together in bauxite ore. They bond together, and in your brain, they do the same thing. They turn into rock in replacing the neurosynapse of your brain, which is what Alzheimer's is all about. So if you want to stay alive and healthy and well, no dental products with sodium fluoride, no aluminum cookware, no aluminum in your deodorant. You got to find clean products, okay? Tom's makes clean products in both of those, but they also make dirty products, so read labels. Then there's mercury. The government loves spreading mercury everywhere they can in the world. And so they put it in your dental fillings, and it does leach out. It's dissolved by your, it's an alloy of mercury and silver, and it does leach out from your saliva. It's dissolved, and then goes into your bloodstream, and then poisons you, and it's a deadly heavy metal. Now we have glyphosate, Roundup, whatever that nasty herbicide is. It's contaminating the entire world, the entire water supply of this country. Everybody has it in their body. They've been using it forever as a weed killer in food fields forever now. They've just been sued because they know it causes cancer. Monsanto was bought by Bayer in Germany. They're still making and pushing it everywhere. Every county and city sprays it all over. I mean, this is the most cruel chemical warfare that you can imagine, and nobody's doing shit about it, okay? If we had an FDA that cared anything about anything, they would not allow this to happen. Here's another one. The new nicotide, or whatever, I can't pronounce the word properly, but it's something I don't know if it's nicotine related or what, but it's the new insecticides that have been around since about 2005, I believe. And immediately upon release and use of those insecticides, the bees disappeared and started crashing with bee collapse, colony collapse, whatever they call it. It's absolute nonsense. They're poisoning the world. The latest insect counts have been come in that the insect counts are down 80% worldwide, which means that's the whole food chain, man. Okay, you know, all the little frog salamanders, this and that, birds eat the bugs, and when there's no bugs to eat, they die and they go away. And then the next type of omnivores and carnivores die because there's nothing to eat, and then everything dies. Okay, so plus all the pollinators are gone, so we can't grow food. That's where this world's going. Okay, by the banking cartel. Thanks, Rockefeller. Thanks, Morgan. Nice guys. You're so benevolent. So we're coming up upon Earth death, which means human death, which means bio death for this planet. It's an ugly, ugly, ugly scene. So don't get the COVID shots. They're worse than COVID. COVID is a bioweapon. COVID vaccines are an extreme bioweapon. Maybe even programmable self-assembling nanoparticles to make you a good little bot yourself. Maybe programmable by 5G. It's what I hear the Department of Defense has conducted their experiments on and are manufacturing all this horseshit. So be aware of that. And all I can say is wake the fuck up, people. Get off the couch. Pull your head forcefully out of your ass and realize what's going on, and let's do something different, okay? And for any of you that ever mention conspiracy theory again, realize you wear the badge of honor for super duper stupid imbecile for the rest of your life. This is no theory, my friend. This is an absolute conspiracy being going on for hundreds and thousands of years. I rest my case. Peace out. Om Tat Sat. Blessings.